In this video, we show how to set up data binding. In Android Studio, let's create an empty activity and call the project Hello World. If we run that, we get the familiar Hello World screen. Okay, let's navigate to Android documentation. Go to Guides, Architecture Components, and Adding Components to your project. Scrolling down, we see it tells us to add Kotlin capped plugin. This may sound a little cryptic, but to find out how to add a Kotlin capped plugin, we need to go to the Kotlin language documentation. Now here, under Docs, under Tools, and then Capped, we find the text we need to add to our Gradle build file. Now that we have our plugin installed, let's set up the rest of data binding. Under Data Binding Library, Get Started, we find the text for turning on data binding in the build, and we copy this into our build Gradle file. Going back to Data Binding Library section, let's look at Layouts and Binding Expressions. What this text is saying here is if we want to use data binding, then we need a data binding layout. A data binding layout is used by the build process to generate binding classes. The binding class gives the code access to the data and the view defined in the layout. So, in this layout, we have the data binding layout tag, a data section, and the view. So returning to our layout file, we create a data binding layout by adding a layout tag. For now, we just give it a view, which we already have. Let's return to the Android documentation. Under the Generated Binding Class section, we are shown how to access the Generated Data Binding class. So let's copy in the example code. Okay, so this is in red. That's because the data binding class name is based on the layout file name. So in this case, the data binding class name should be Activity Main Binding. Now we have an instance of the Generated Binding class, which provides access to the view and the data in a layout. Now this isn't necessary, but I think it makes it clearer. Let's create a view variable and use that to set the content. So if we run this, everything should look the same. And indeed it does. But this time, we are using data binding.